Getting back to order, 6:28. Next up on the agenda is A6. City Attorney Kylie Finnell is here to present ordinance to amend BMC Chapter 9.32 entitled Unauthorized Camping.
Thank you. Just gonna get set up here.
Perfect.
A draft ordinance was uploaded just before the meeting at around 4 o'clock. So if you haven't refreshed your packet, that's what it is. I've also provided a hard copy for the council members that are here in the conference room. But I'll give everyone a chance to get settled if you haven't had a chance to download that yet.
Oh, sorry. All right.
So this is our 5th study session looking at the amendment of the code section that deals with unauthorized camping. This time I took into consideration the comments that were made at the last study session. However, I will admit that in going through that with Michael Rea, there were times where it appeared that there was either contradictory concurrence on certain points, and it was a little unclear for certain exactly where a majority of council was leaning. And so rather to sort of go with what we thought was the clear direction, we did include a couple of additional phrases in here for consideration tonight, just to help move us along. There was also discussion kind of about giving some thought to unintended consequences. That meeting, of course, is like a lot of these have gone pretty long, and there's been a lot of ideas shared. I'm trying to capture all that in everyone's comments and how many agreed with this, that, and the other. Did the best we could. Certainly, if you don't see something that was important to you in here, I'm like, once again, it's a draft. So I will happy to start.
Are there additional copies of this?
There are
Available right now?
Yeah, if everyone has, I can share some
paper. A couple of people in the audience. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, okay. You're okay?
We can't. We don't have access to it.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So the first page is just the beginning of putting together those whereas sections. The ones that are in here are fairly plain. They're not the detailed ones that we saw in like the Lakewood ordinance or some of the other ordinances. I want to skip that part for right now, if we can. And then I'm just going to just tell you an overview of what I did, and then I'll turn it over to President Coughlin. I think he wanted to kind of introduce it as well. I tried to incorporate the definitions that we discussed. It's in the definitions. There's really only 2 or 1 that was just available overnight shelter. A definition of sidewalk lined up with some of the changes that council wanted. And then there goes into what places are prohibited all the time, and then how enforcement is suspended, and the rest of the code sections remain. So, President Coughlin, did you have something you wanted to add?
Sure. If you're done kind of presenting there, yeah, thanks for incorporating all the feedback from the past 4. This is the 5th study session now, as we continue to work on this. And so I think for council going forward, I'm really hopeful we can come up with something here that can go to a vote at the next meeting on the 6th. I think we all agree we spent a lot of time on this. So maybe as a way to approach this is to do a round of questions just on what's written and what's presented, just to make sure we're all clear, the language being used and what the effects would be. And then we could do a round on what people's thoughts are, if there's any suggestions to tweak it.
Yeah, and I can go through a little bit. If I could, before we go to people, I just
Absolutely,
want a little bit more time on that. So like I said, just for now, skipping over the whereases, where I see the meat of the ordinance is in the 3rd page where it talks about the public places where camping is prohibited at all times. This is under section 932.020 sub B. It's on page 3 of the ordinance as it is in PDF.
I'll go ahead and share that section as we're looking at it on Zoom, then
Okay.
take it down when we're ready for questions.
I have a request. Can we go over the change? I mean, this is a real brief thing. Can we go over each item that was changed? It's either in blue or red. And before we discuss, I can't, I have to be able to read, I'm sorry, in like silence. Give me like a minute to read so there's
Sure.
no talking, and then I can discuss. That may sound weird.
We could
but
take a few minutes
I
to
can't
read it.
operate that.
So it'll take a few minutes to read it when everyone's done. Open Zoom.
Yeah, on both the definitions that are there.
So first of all, there's lettering on here that
Let me
is,
just check. Is everyone good to proceed? Time to read it? All right, see thumbs up. All right.
is okay. There's no difference between red and blue. Unfortunately, that just involved us working on multiple versions and different colors showing up at different times. So don't pay any mind to that. The available, starting with the available shelter, I guess we'll start there. That's the definitions that we discussed at the last study session. It came from looking at what other cities were doing. There were things that, this is an area, I guess, where I felt like I had a pretty good consensus on the direction to go. And we tried to incorporate that. It involved the discussion of the city designated camping areas located within the city. Right now, those don't exist, but the council indicated an intent to leave the open for, in case the administration creates something like that, that would be included in the definition of available overnight shelter. There was the discussion about how far away from Bremerton is too far. And at that point, there was a consensus for within Kitsap County would be okay as long as there was transportation available at no cost. So that was incorporated. And then there was a reference to, there was a discussion about how Paul's Boat Ordinance looked at whether a family unit cannot use the available because of the some sort of restriction that would not be considered available. What was not included in this was the provision regarding a person who was trespassed from a shelter. So that there was consensus that not be included. So that's not in the definition that's before you at A. So I felt like that one we had at least captured what we believe was the intent of the council at the last study session. The sidewalk definition, that wasn't discussed, but what was discussed is later on when I get down, the issue of people camping in the sidewalk and on planting strips. And so that definition helps clarify the later prohibition. And so that definition was pulled from our city code. It's something that I guess a different council has come up with for defining sidewalks. And so I didn't create a new definition. I just used the one that was already in our sidewalk code. So going further down, the subsection A is the existing code. The only thing I changed was I added unlawful camping as a title, and those are just to help with organization. Subsection B is the one that is a completely new section, and this has to do with places where camping is prohibited at all times. Our current ordinance prohibits camping at all times. And this ordinance prohibits camping at all times only on in certain places, not all places. Toward the end of the meeting last study session, it appeared that the consensus was for parks to not be included, or to be included on the list of places where people could not camp, and that street sidewalks as well as the planting strip be included in that spot. So that's what you see on subsections 1 and 2. Subsections 3 and 4 were not explicitly discussed at the last meeting, and I've put them here just in case the council wanted to consider them, because they're in other codes as well. Not every building is listed in subsection 3. Director Elavato, or no, I'm sorry, Director Nike pointed out that the Olympus building isn't on there. It says that buildings including but not limited to, and basically subsection 3 would be city properties where there is a building, would also be on this list. And then finally, properties owned by the city that aren't open to the public and which are posted with signs prohibiting trespass. There are a number of places like that, our watershed being a big one. And that's just that those aren't open to anyone. You have to have special authorization to be in those areas, or it's otherwise unsafe. I'm also thinking about perhaps the culverts as being a place where we have had people set up camp, and those are not safe because of flash flooding and things. So you get to the subsection C, and it indicates that enforcement is suspended except within public places with uses set forth in sub B. The authority to issue a citation and file charges shall be suspended at any time there is no overnight shelter available for the individual camping. Of course, that definition goes back up to the definition section so that you know what that is. So why is that highlighted? Well, one, I wanted it to be clear that I added that in, just so you know. 2, it is, we need to have the discussion about what is going to be prohibited, because you can't say in subsection A that camping in all public places is prohibited, and then you list all public places in the next section. So the question, begs the question, well, what's left, right? If you went with 1, 2, 3, and 4, what would be left? Conveniently, in our city auditor, under the direction of the audit committee, has been undertaking an audit project looking at properties that the city has that are undeveloped and that would perhaps be suitable for affordable housing. I've spoken with our auditor, and there's the potential to be able to dovetail that work with the consideration of what would be available if we're in that zone where enforcement is suspended in undeveloped city properties. How much space is going to be available. There are several properties identified. I don't know. I think our audit committee members are more familiar with that than even I am at this point. But so I just want it to be clear that those are not going to be city designated camping areas like you see in Tacoma. What it would be, I mean, it could be, but that's not where it would work in the code. What it would be that those undeveloped properties are going to be where the city does not pursue any enforcement actions when there's no camping space available. And so I think for fairness and humanity and all things like that, that we would need to make those places known to people. If we're in that situation, we can't simply say, well, you can't camp here, here, and here. Good luck finding where you can. I think that there would need to be some way to identify those properties and make that information available to the public. But again, those are different than a city designated camping area. Those would be the areas where we don't enforce our general ban on camping when there's no shelter space available. Does that make sense? No? Yes? No? Makes sense to Eric. Okay, I can explain it again. So, a city designated camping area as it's defined under the available overnight shelter. What I mean in that is, an area where the city has set up an outdoor shelter. And there are, it's like, welcome to the city of Bremerton. They sometimes have a name. They are, often they have fencing, security, they have services there. That is, I think, different than saying there's an area that the city is not going to enforce the camping ordinance. With no shelter space available are going to be undeveloped city properties. So it's more of a, this is where you can go and you won't be cited for camping in public when there's no shelter space available. It's not going to be, and obviously the situation we have now isn't suitable either. But it's going to be related to the enforcement action. And those are different things. Does that make sense? Okay. And so the unauthorized storage in public places is set up to mirror that. I do want to just briefly touch on sub 1 about parks. There is a little bit more than it just says parks. There is a provision under this code that's existing about a permit. You can read more about that below. But I wanted it to be clear that our parks are open to everybody during daylight hours, regardless of, you know, whether you're housed or unhoused. And that I didn't want anything in this code to be seen as a prohibition on using a park facility consistent with park rules. When you look at the definition of camping paraphernalia, it talks about like having a blanket or something like that. We know that people sometimes use blankets, sometimes people set up sun shelters or, you know, things like tents or things in the park when they're using them, and that basically whatever rules there are for everyone in the parks, this code isn't meant to interfere with that. So again, that's the rest of the code. I have not heard any desire to change that, and so I have not made any edits to the rest of the code. And so I think at this point I'm ready to answer questions.
Did you speak on the storage?
Yes, just briefly. It mirrors the language in camping, in that it is basically enforced at the same time and in the same places as the previous section. There is one provision where we added the parking code because it talks about camping facilities, which include RVs. So obviously RVs need to be parked in accordance with our parking code.
Okay, let's do a round of just questions on anything that's ambiguous or we don't understand and that's presented. Start with go Dennehy top and then Chamberlain and go in the room.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Attorney Finnell, for your work on this. I think we're getting a lot closer. If you could pull up the document, the one question I had about the permit, I believe it's the park director being able to permit if the city designates. It says permit any park or public space. Scroll down, sorry.
Yeah, it's an 04.
Yeah,
right
in the permit section. It's in A. So the director is authorized by permit to allow persons to camp, occupy camping facilities, or to use storing camping paraphernalia within or on any park or other public place that may be designated by the city for such use in the city of Bremerton, subject to the applicable code ordinances. I think as a council, we decided that any park would be an exception, would always be off limits, which is different than a public place that the audit committee is looking at. So I guess my question is, like, the plain reading of that means that it would be the director's discretion, if the city designates like Evergreen Park to be a place that's camping. This code would allow it, where I think the intent of council is to say no parking at any parks at any time, as long as there are other available spaces. And so that other public place that was designated, I think, is closer to the intent of council. Am I reading that correctly? That under this right now, the director, if the city designated Evergreen Park or Lions Park, that could be used as a place to camp.
Sure. So the way that first the permit is actually really old. That's actually 2004 code. It's
Okay.
been there a really long time. So that's nothing new. There's a few things, I guess, involved there. This is one of those areas where, like, sometimes camping could be considered recreation, and sometimes camping is habitation, right? And it kind of depends on the duration. And our code does not have this restriction, but some of the other ones actually limit in the code section for permitting. And I would defer to Director Elevato as to how many of these have been issued or the circumstances, because I don't know. I will point out, though, it's not just Director Elevato. If you look up upstream, it can actually be any city director. I know Marysville has their police department, their police chief issue camping permits. It's any director.
Yeah, unless that's a common practice that I haven't known about. You know, I don't want to delineate between like recreational camping and actually like finding shelter. You know, I don't want to base our policy based on the socioeconomic circumstances of the people, but I would want that to be stricken unless that's something that we regularly do, is offer permits to people to actually camp in the parks, because I think
the Director Elevato, if I can, because I think he has
Sure.
some information to share on that.
Sorry, it's hard for me to see when it's all small. I apologize.
No, thank you. It is a bit confusing because, as Attorney Finnell said, we consider camping as recreational, and so when you classify unauthorized camping or living in a park, many parks throughout many systems have campgrounds. State parks are notorious for having campgrounds, and camping is a recreational activity that people enjoy. We have used that ability in the past. An example I would give you is the Boy Scouts at Forest Ridge Park were doing an overnight event. They asked for permission, and we granted a permit for them to spend the night in Forest Ridge Park. It was highly regulated. We had requirements for them to be there. We had our standing insurance forms in place. So it was an opportunity to use that space for that. We also have youth sports tournaments, soccer and softball and baseball. And oftentimes those people travel with travel trailers or RVs, and they requested the ability to spend the night in the Pendergast parking lot, for example, during a tournament. So we've granted those things. So I believe the ordinance as it's written does a good job of giving us the parameters that will allow, without restricting recreational camping in parks. I don't believe that section, and please correct me if I'm wrong, addresses the designation of camping site in a park. I still think you have the authority as a city to do that. But that's my impression of that section of the code, that, yeah, that's going to be applicable. And quickly to speak to the other portion, that number one, we do allow people to use the parks during the day. And we often get comments from folks that someone in a sleeping bag or has a small tent pitched for the day is an encampment. And actually it's not. It's a family with a sunshade up. And there are some folks also who sleep in the park in a sleeping bag during the day. As long as they're behaving and doing what they need to do, that's perfectly fine. That's what the open space is for. Hopefully that explains.
Excellent. So that it sounds like it would be a case by case basis for a director, either yourself or another director, to have somebody apply for that permit to actually camp overnight in what we consider parks. And so if our intent was to designate an open space that's not necessarily a park to be where folks are able to, live basically, you could delineate between the recreational versus other types of camping. Is that your interpretation, Attorney Finnell?
What I would say though is any activity that's not recreational is going to be covered under the Park Protection Act.
Gotcha.
And so, if Director Elevato decided to turn a portion of one of the parks listed in the Park Protection Act into a camping, or a facility for temporary housing, I think that there would be a good argument that wouldn't be recreational.
That's a state statute, is that right?
No, it's actually a referendum that was passed by the voters in 1989 here in Bremerton.
Oh, great. Awesome. Okay, cool. That's all my questions then. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
30
Oh, sorry,
properties.
go ahead.
It has 30 properties listed there.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
If I could add one more thing, the camping, the allowable or permitted camping has a duration. It's a time frame associated with. So it's like, the Boy Scouts, they needed Saturday night. So we approved up to Saturday night. So it has a duration. Whereas an unlawful encampment or a legitimate encampment maybe wouldn't have that duration time, saying it starts at this time, ends at this time. So I think that's another tool that we can use to make sure that we don't have long-term encampments that stay in parks and public space for a long time. In my opinion.
Yeah. So I think if you were concerned about that happening, a way thing that the council could do would be to add a time duration limit under the permit. I think other cities that I looked at had 7 days. It's the limit, the outward limit to what a director could authorize.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Thank you so much. I think that's it for me this round.
Perfect. Chamberlain.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I have 4 points. Actually I have 5, and I have a broader concern that I'm just gonna bring up now. And then I'm gonna go to specific points so that I can hurry up and get done so the next person can talk. My larger concern is that we not create something akin to an unfunded mandate. So I just want y'all to think about that, that we don't have any funding associated with this, that we haven't even really talked about that. Okay, so I'm going to go in reverse order. Attorney Finnell, down at the bottom, 9.32.060, easy fix, instead of he or she, the director. So taking out the gendered language. And I see that that was done in previous sections. I hope that that's not a source of contention with anybody. Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, cool.
Me.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I missed it in this draft.
No, I know it was just an oversight. Good deal. 9.32.050. Let's talk about the penalties. And I feel like this was discussed before. Is this a fine that is required by RCW?
No,
What was that?
no, I don't believe that fine is required by RCW.
Okay, this is just the status quo on what's been there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, I mean, this is something that I think we should discuss. Maybe we could have a process for a warning prior to any kind of infractions being issued. And also, could we lower that, counselors, to something different? Do we want to have habitual violators of 3 or more infractions? Is this language that we want to continue? So that's my second or third point for us to consider. I mean, if you get pulled over with a broken taillight, you get a fix-it ticket. So is there something like that for camping, right? And then in reverse order. Okay, so we already talked about with Director Elevato, 9.32.040, the permit. So Director Elevato, is there a formal like a form, a process that people can complete with you? Like, is there an online form, or do you have a registration form for folks who are applying for camping in these legal ways?
Form, in fact, we have no camping facilities in any of our systems. So what we do is take it on a case by case and make sure that all of those elements are met, like receptacles. Do we have the ability to have restrooms? Is there security, appropriate security? So as those things are listed, those are the things that we evaluate on a case by case basis. So it's really a request that comes from the user, and then we evaluate that and make sure that it meets the criteria of the park protection for use of parks, and then also meets
So
the safety, all those elements.
thank you. So it's informal rather than a formal process.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then going back up to 9.32.020, I think that Attorney Finnell was bringing up the concern that I think we would all have about Section A, just having the language "or other places," other public places. I think we need to really suss that out, because the other idea that she brought up, which is something that I believe administration is working on, is finding appropriate undeveloped parcels. And so there does need to be something in the code that shows the rights of folks who are camping in these undeveloped parcels. And to have it be other public places is too vague. I think that there's a lot of interpretation that could be made that may not be fair, that may be biased for houseless individuals. Those are my points. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else with questions? Let's go up, not older than younger.
Eric, did you want to go first?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I have very few questions. 9.32.010A, there's a list of, your marital status or your religion can't be, can't be used to forbid you the available overnight shelter. Pets.
Yeah, it's not in there. I mean, I'm just saying, like, want to change it.
No, I'm just saying that that's often a bar, is people do not want to abandon their pets. That's a typical thing of most pallet cities, is that they will allow pets. If anybody else feels like this needs to be inserted, great. Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving. 9.32.020B, in the list of places where you can't ever camp, ever. What happened to critical areas?
Sensitive areas. Yeah, I think at the last meeting, it seemed like that we had gone from those to then it went back to just going to I guess my understanding was at the last meeting that was taken off the list.
Well, my understanding from and here, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm often wrong. My understanding was that we were going with more positive language, which is like you have to either stay in an overnight shelter if one's available, or in a designated camping area, which we have yet to define. And here we're spending a lot of time saying, here's the areas that can't be designated camping areas. So if we're going to go to all that level of detail.
So again, it's not, these are the areas that can't be designated camping areas. So the designated camping areas are the to be determined. Those are the things that I guess we would that could exist in the future. Those are not the same as an undeveloped property where the city doesn't do enforcement, no shelter spaces available.
We could also be using those undeveloped areas as designated camping areas. Is that not correct?
If they're developed that way. But what I'm saying is like an empty lot that's on a street that doesn't have any facilities isn't what it seemed that people had in mind when they were thinking about it. A city designated open air shelter where you have rules and security and wash stations and all of that. That is what that is it's an empty lot and it's a place where the city wouldn't be doing enforcement if there was no shelter space available. The same as the city's not doing enforcement on planting strips if there's no shelter space available.
Okay. Okay, so I'm still confused because we're listing all of the things in this 0.020B where the prohibition is applying at all times. And I'm wondering why that doesn't apply to streams, wetlands, water bodies, steep slopes.
Right. It was my understanding at the last council meeting that that was not included in what was going forward, but it could certainly, we could add, I don't
Can confirm the majority consensus was to take out the protected areas because it was covered under other code already.
Oh.
I think there was concern about the critical areas not being readily
I
identifiable.
expressed that, like people don't
right,
know
like
that.
and an officer not knowing whether it was or not, and then it being an enforcement area, and then so that areas.
Okay.
I think that the properties owned by the city that aren't open to the public, like the watershed, obviously falls under that definition and the other one, but that they could be posted with a no trespassing sign. So I think that the thought was that an area posted with a no trespassing sign was a much more readily understandable. Does that make sense? I guess from my perspective.
No, I totally get you at this point. I'm sorry.
And so I think I think it was subsumed under that. Okay. Sub 4.
And then I had a question about the director, but you've already answered that. And I would also say that in lots of other municipalities, the permitted camping is not just for Boy Scout events, which was the very first thing I thought of, but it'll also be something that will happen in response to an emergency, like an earthquake or a hurricane. Yeah. So I'm very happy for that language to stay there. And I really would be happy if we never had to use it for that. That's all I have for this round. Please carry on.
Okay, so the only excellent, I think you followed the intentions of the council. Threw me a little curveball with items 3 and 4, but I understand why they were included. So I'm talking top of page 3, public places where camping is prohibited at all times. So you've included, I say you broadly, the city has included in this proposed ordinance, city-owned buildings, parking lots and appurtenances used to conduct business in the city, and then properties owned by the city that are not open to the public and which are posted with signs prohibiting trespass. The problem, I think it's been mentioned, is that someone that is presented with this and they're unsheltered, they have no idea where they can go.
Right.
As you mentioned. So what I'm suggesting is that something to this following language, I don't write ordinances for a living, which would follow or be continuation of 4, where it says properties owned by the city that are not open to the public and which are posted with signs prohibiting trespass, period. Next sentence, a list of available city-owned properties that are open to the public for camping will be made public. However that is done. I don't want to, if it's website, my preference would be not only a website, but if a police officer or any city official is saying someone to move along, they also provide a list of saying, here's where you can move along to, that's authorized. Okay, that's only the fair thing to do. Don't make them go on the internet. Okay. And then the next sentence is, these properties are not available, the properties on this list or whatever, you know what I'm saying, are not available for camping if a city designated camping area is available. Okay. All right. The next thing is my preference, and I believe the majority of people's preference is for there to be a city designated camping area. So this needs to have enough of you got the carrot and the stick. This has to have enough an incentive for the city to go ahead and have that city designated camping area. In other words, there needs to be enough city properties that are available for camping made to the public that the city has an incentive to go ahead and set up the camp. That's the key on this. You can't just designate it one or two little areas or whatever and say, okay, we're all done. Because I believe the intent of the council was we're going to have shelters. That's preference number one. Preference number two is if all else fails, there'll be a designated camping area. And look, we need to have the basic necessities for that. So people can use the facilities with all the respect everyone's entitled to, and has the ability to wash their hands, and has the ability to store their stuff overnight with a reasonable sense of security that their stuff is going to be there when they go out to look for a job or go for services or whatnot, which would not be available. None of those three probably at a city, an area that's open to the camping. So the preference would be a city-owned, a city-designated camping area. And so we need to have a comprehensive list for the council to consider and say, okay, there's enough of an incentive for this administration to come up with a city-designated camping area.
So the list that I talked to Jenny about, Tim's the auditor, is what the audit committee's been looking at for affordable housing. And so she does, I think she's identified, I think she said 10 properties. Is it less than? More? Okay. And I think that there could be even more, because in speaking with her, some of the things that she removed it from the list were areas that were too small, but they wouldn't be too small for this. And I'll give you an example. There's a city-owned parcel kind of across the street from the Bug Museum. It's behind trees. We have received complaints from the people who live above it, but I know that the real team, or I believe maybe it was the county park team, has been in contact with the people there. They're on a wait list for housing and taking any action or anything against them. And so it would be places like that, that's working for them right now, right? I mean, it's not ideal, obviously. They don't want to live there long term, but it's not a place where we're doing enforcement. And those were things that were removed from Jenny's list because it's not a space large enough to build a house.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But so what the code would, I guess, open up would be undeveloped property that doesn't meet any of these definitions as being a place where the city's, has a trespass for some other reason or something like that. And so I'm not making, for lack of a better word, a judgment call on anything other than the fact that it's not meeting these definitions that the council is setting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's understandable, but I also don't want the city to read this ordinance and say, okay, we can take care of this. We'll post no trespass signs on all our property, and then that kind of defeats the whole intent of the council. I'm not saying that the administration would do that, but here's the other thing. If you have a city designated camping area, I'm by no means an expert on this subject, probably the least knowledgeable person in this room, but just using common sense. If you have all these little city owned pockets of property, let's say 20, 30, 40 that people could camp in, it's going to be easier for a provider of services to go to one city designated camping area to take care of these people, to address their needs. And also for law enforcement, in case there's a problem, they know our city security system, instead of going to 40 different city properties, go to one. We need to have a city designated camping area. So however we craft this, it has to be punitive enough to the city to say, okay, gosh darn it, I'm going to go ahead and put one up. That's my bottom line. If I don't see it in the ordinance, I can't support it. I love this ordinance. I think this is simple, but it has to have teeth. You have to be able to do it.
Ditto, big time. I was looking for that, and it feels, my perception is that since our last meeting, this has backed away from designating camping sites. And there's an unwillingness to include that expression or, and I want to push on that. I believe we have consensus on council that ultimately we want a designated camping site or two or whatever, practically for the reasons that Councilmember Younger expressed, much easier to serve. And I think there's enough knowledge on this council. I met with Robin O'Grady for lunch. We're friends. She runs Kitsap a rescue mission, and she's calling for a family shelter, so that would free up in the current shelter beds for individuals and couples. So there's a lot of great work being done out there, and that's going to take a year for them to transition to Port Orchard. So I'm learning things that I really should be learning in this role through this means, without having to go out to the community to find out. So we have a year. Let's set up the ordinance to support a city designated authorized camping spot. We don't have to call it a facility if we don't want to, but let's set it up for what we want it to be. And then we can hold the administration accountable if it doesn't happen and support it in whatever way we possibly can.
Take my turn. Got a few other notes, but I'd say that as this is written, it actually does create an incentive for the administration to identify and create that basically regulated camping site with support. Because I don't see us as a council being able to say and put in really stone ordinance, this is the site, because that may change. I think the administration needs to be the one that, if they set up a regulated spot, needs to look at it and say, right now, for the next 6 months, a year, this is the best spot, and that may change. What this does do is it opens up under the definition of available overnight shelter for that regulated city encampment to be there. So I see a couple scenarios. One, this mayor or the next mayor, the one after that, because I don't think this is an issue that unfortunately is going to be, we as a city have to deal with it for the rest of our lifetime. The mayor may be able to work with the county and have a large facility that's managed by the county with transportation, with resources, and that's the best thing for everyone all throughout the county. This allows that to happen. And if that happens, then there's shelter space available. Then there's no camping allowed in the city at all. If it's the case where that doesn't come together and we don't get cohesive county state support, then it does create an incentive that unless a camping area is created, folks will rightfully so be able to camp in the unapproved city lots. And if that bothers anyone, that puts pressure on the administration to come up with a solution and to come back to us with council as a proposal and say, here's a solution, it's going to require some funding, work together. So I don't see anything in the code right now that needs changing. I think it captures the intent of council that, yeah, ideally in the short term, a regulated space in the city is ideal. I think that incentive is still there. So I don't really see the need for us to craft a certain specific space right now. I think that the flexibility is there.
Well, actually, can I build on that? No, I
Let me finish with another round. Yeah, just to,
we'll see.
yeah. And I'll just say that, yeah, 7 days permit, I have no problem adding that. And the violation penalty to Chamberlain's point, happy tweaking. I did want to ask a question there though. So if somebody is cited under 932.050 penalty, it does say subject to a monetary penalty of $105. Just want to say it out loud. Of course, it's awful for somebody who's camping and obviously does not have any money to spare to be then fined $105. But my understanding is that if that goes to the court, our court has the ability to essentially waive that. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I think the court is required to take into account a person's ability to pay, right, Michael? They can also do community service.
They are, but the first violation is an infraction, so it's not
Oh, that's right. That's only on criminal fines. I'm sorry.
right, right.
So, a few things. The community service is available.
Pardon me.
The other thing would be the council, they can lower it, they can make it a warning. Most cities that go straight to misdemeanor, frankly. And ours had this system where we did like 2 infractions and then misdemeanor, but most of the cities went straight to misdemeanor. But we can, if that's where we can, it really is just changing the numbers. And this is a local ordinance. And so there's not a state table or anything like that that's in play.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification there. Let me ask the council before round 2. I see 2 ways of going forward. We could just do another round with thoughts and comments, or we could go kind of section by section and see if we have in each section a majority to tweak it until we get to the end and have an ordinance that at least the majority feels comfortable with.
Can we do one more round?
Around general comments? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, general comments. Let's go. Chamberlain, then Dennehy, then the room.
Dennehy, were you first?
I was, if you want to defer to me, but that you don't
Referring
have
to you, sir.
It's so nice. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Okay, so I heard some comments, and I'm just going to give like a quick overhead legal lesson, right? Constitution, the supreme law of the land. It dictates the types of laws that municipalities and states and Congress can pass. If it conflicts with that, those are violative of constitutional rights. The Ninth Circuit said, if you do not have a place for people to go, shelter, or a designated camping spot, it is cruel and unusual punishment to criminalize that behavior. That's what our code was. It was like no camping anywhere. Now this is the fix, right? So we could have a couple options. One of the options is completely repealing it, let anybody on any public space camp anywhere. We as a council and as a city said, no, that's not really great. That's not what we want to do as a community. We want to designate some places. So these exceptions, so it says basically, you are not allowed to camp in all of these places the entire time, even if there aren't shelter beds available. If there's no shelter beds available, and if there's no designated camping spot, we would not enforce this ordinance because we would be sued under the 8th Amendment, right? So what we're creating is a list of exceptions and acceptable places where people can camp, and creating a list of no matter what, these are places as a society we do not want camping. So I believe President Coughlin is the most accurate in the way that this should be going. We are not asking the city attorney's office to determine the political decision of where those designated camping spots are going to be. We are asking the city attorney's office to make sure that this law comports with the Ninth Circuit's interpretation of the 8th Amendment. So what we are needing to do, because we are the politically elected, and the mayor specifically, who represents the entire community, we or the mayor needs to be determining where we are going to most expeditiously decide where camping or basically living outside is available. And I agree. I think it's the administration that knows how much it's going to cost to build a bathroom, how much it's going to cost to get piping in so people have clean water to drink. Eric's point is absolutely correct. Like, we should not be designating 15 different areas because, one, it's hard to regulate. The list of liability that City Attorney Finnell already brought up to us about having patrols, about having fair facilities, making sure that we are in compliance with our insurance pool so that if anything happens, we are insured. That should be concentrated into certain areas. And I think the administration is best set up to, you know, Denise, you say this all the time, you don't like duplicativity of services. The mayor is already networked into all the other political aspects of the county to figure out how we can pool all our resources Where does it make sense? Here's an auditor's list, thanks to Chair Mockler's great vision of, already looking at affordable housing. It just happens to dovetail with this ordinance. Here are our parcels. These are the ones that are available. These are the resources that we think that we can be looking for to make sure that people are living with dignity, with sanitation, as Eric says, a place to store their things so that they can go out and get the services and look for work without being hassled. Like, we need to take this ordinance. I think it's a really, really, really good start. And I think we're almost there. Put that on the books, incentivize the mayor to then decide, okay, so they're allowing certain designated camping areas to go through. These are the areas that I've decided and discussed that these are going to be, the best ways to do it. Bring it back to council, either as a singular budget item or through the budget process, and say, hey, I've done all my research. All of my directors have done their research. I've talked with legal. These are the 3 parcels or the 2 parcels that have access to transportation that are going to be either the cheapest or like the best bang for the buck. And then present that to us. This is the dollar amount. And then we get that dollar amount going. And we need to do it during this council, because I will not be on this council coming in the future year. There's 2 other council members that might not be on this council based on elections. Like, we have the political will to do this. We have to do it smartly, but again, we don't have to be the only ones involved in this process. We aren't the subject matter experts. Our job is to create ordinances and to create funding for some fixes. So it's not the attorney's office that needs to come with us and say, hey, these are the parcels. This is a law that works. It has the intent of the council. It's constitutionally correct. And then we can work with the administration to make sure that whatever designated camping spot is funded and has, whether it's small houses, whether it's a parcel, pallet home, things like that. But we can't just go back to the city attorney and say, hey, I didn't see a designated list on here. What's that? That's our job. That's the mayor's job. This is the intent of this ordinance right now. And I think we should move forward.
Chamberlain.
There, I'm sorry, the Zoom went away for a minute. Thank you. I'm really sorry that I didn't get to hear your building upon point, Eric. Maybe if you get another chance. But I do want to kind of respond to one city designated area, which I think is problematic. Because just for instance, first of all, it harkens back to something that President Coughlin brought up when he was reading from the book that was provided to us by the coalition, where you don't want to have one giant tent city, because that can be problematic. Also, there's going to be situations where people who are unhoused may have court cases pending against each other, so they can't be in the same facility. Like, those kinds of situations could come up. And so we need to have a diverse, diverse options to send folks. And I also want to talk about, so thank you, President Coughlin, for bringing back up the infractions, talking about 9.3, 2.050. I want to just kind of talk about how impractical community service is for some of these folks. If folks don't have shoes, for instance, if they are mentally unwell, they're not going to be able to serve on any kind of crew that goes even to pick up trash. So I don't think, I would just like us to explore a more lenient process, and just for those considerations. And I think that's all the points I'd like to make this round. Thank you. And I'd love to go piece by piece whenever y'all are ready.
What's any other high level comments or questions for Attorney Finnell?
Let's vote.
Can I do a round, I guess?
Yeah.
Around.
With that, yeah.
I'm just hearing a lot of things, and so I want to talk about
Clarify any.
Yeah,
misconceptions or anything that's not quite right.
a couple of things. again, so there's two different concepts going on that are being talked about in some circumstances interchangeably. And I just want to make sure it's really, really clear. So you look at the definition of available overnight shelter up at A, right? That is where we're headed. That's where we want to be. We want it to be where we have available overnight shelter for everyone. And ideally that's a house, that's an apartment, that's a ranch, whatever someone wants, right? No, that's, you know, someone having a place to live. That's where we'd like to be, but under this definition, it's going to be a shelter, whether that's public or private, or it's going to be a city designated camping area. And when I use that term, and I just made that up, I mean the thing that you're talking about that you want, that which is like facilities and services and a place where there's security. There's also rules. There's a process for becoming a resident there, right? Those are like how, like facilities in Tacoma, you get checked in, you have a space that, you know, that's yours, there's whatever that might look like. That is not the same as what is left over when you take all these things off the list of where a person can locate themselves. And so I just wanted to make sure it's really clear. And so when you, if you guys, if the council passed this as it was written, there would need to be what Eric talked about, a list of the undeveloped, what this leads, in my opinion, is undeveloped city property. These are not, I think there's some concern that sometimes these ordinances are designed to push people into the margins. Some of the properties that at least I'm aware, they are the most visible places in the city. This is not a problem that is going to be pushed to the fringes of people's existence. Some of for the people on audit committee, you might be aware, but they're certainly not on the fringes of the city limits or something. And so the concept, I guess, this is written, and what Councilmember Younger was talking about was, I just want it to be clear that if the council passed this, it would go into effect whether or not there was a designated camping area. And I didn't, because I don't want you to feel like you were misled or something like that. It means that there will be an incentive, I guess, for the city to create a designated camping area, because until or provide shelter space or provide housing or whatever, until that happens, those undeveloped city properties are going to be open for camping. And they're, like I said, they're not out of sight or something like that. I mean, the same type of complaints that you have all seen related to the encampments on MLK and that's spreading into the neighborhood adjacent to MLK. I suspect that until we find adequate shelter for everyone that experiencing homelessness, that we'll continue to receive those. It's not that this is going to go away. I think I just wanted that to be clear, because I don't want there to be a misconception that this ordinance creates those areas or anything like that. I can identify for you what is a piece of city property not affected by this list. I mean, I can do that. That's not, that is, I guess, within the realm of like me being able to look at property and say, is this impacted by this code? But it's not going to be, I can't do what's in this definition right here, but I can do what's in this, what's left after these. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, please, Younger.
I'm in total agreement with Attorney Finnell and with Jeff here. If you put something to the effect of what I said, a list of available city-owned properties that are open to the public or camping will be made public. These properties are not available for camping. If a city designated camping area is available, I think something to that effect will suffice. You do not need to come up with a list. The administration needs to come up with a list. They can use Jenny's audit report, but it doesn't have to be everything's on an audit report. Well, all I'm asking is, checks and balances. I want to see that list before I vote on it. So I know a good faith effort has been made, so I know there's a lot available. And I totally agree with you, Kylie, that not only will these properties, their public properties will be available, we'll have an ample number that will be available. But the difference is now the community knows they're available and where they are, whereas they don't now. So that will be an incentive because the political pressure will be, this ordinance, if passed, should, I believe, take care of the complaints of the people on MLK Way and all the neighborhoods where the camping is on the right of way, on the sidewalks. It will shift it to our city-owned properties, which are surrounded by other community members that are going to have the same complaints unless the city comes up with a city-designated camping area, and then those properties go away. Those are no longer available. That's my understanding how this ordinance is written. So as written, if you add that in there, I am good with this ordinance as a good first step, subject to hearing public comment next week. So
Is this is just a question, is the audit committee, I believe, meeting on Monday?
Yes,
And is that before
I have to give you a longer answer than yes or no.
Okay, that's fine. I don't need it. I was just curious if it was.
It will, tier 1 is a list of 10 parcels. Tier 2 is a list of some 20 to 40 parcels, I believe. And tier 3 is a list of just all city-owned surplus property that includes places like watershed labs.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, available comments for either of y'all. Yeah.
I think this ordinance is great right now. I completely agree with you. I thought you made a good presentation. I think that since we do not have a list in front of us, that if we are waiting for that list, that we will wait a while. It will be very easy to open up this ordinance as soon as we have such a list, Eric. But right now we don't have it. The list has gone from the auditor to the audit committee. That's not going to be enough to review for anybody. I think we should pass this ordinance as it stands. It's not enforceable unless we have these things, and we haven't got these things.
I want to clarify, it is enforceable. It's to these areas.
Yeah.
Without having a designated camping space available. That's I guess the point I wanted to make clear that if the council passed this ordinance, then there could be enforcement, right, on areas where people are camping right now, regardless of whether the city has created a designated camping area. I don't think that the council should pass it without there being a list of where people should go. So I would not be recommending that you pass it here, like as it is. When I say a list, I don't mean like a list of like, these are great spots. I just mean like a list of undeveloped property.
I'm really going to very strongly disagree with you, and I'll tell you why, respectfully. I think that is something for the administration to determine which, like the administration knows what properties it has, and it can easily look at this list and make that determination. I don't think we have the staff or the knowledge to compose that list. Yeah, I just really think we don't.
we're not being asked to. The council's not being asked to.
Well, this is what Attorney Finnell is just saying, which is that if we pass this ordinance, sorry, hang on, almost done there. Is that if we pass this ordinance as it stands, it will, that she does not recommend passing this ordinance until we have the list appended. And I'm saying that's going to push us forward until snow is flying.
No.
The ordinance says a list. That's all that needs to be passed.
Right. Well, I think that a list of, the list is not, what I imagine on this is not a judgment call. It is a definition. It is undeveloped property. not whether it meets anything. A list of property that the city owns that doesn't have a building on it is easy to produce. That does not involve someone looking at compatible uses. Oh, this one's near a school, we shouldn't put it on a list. It is not a judgment call. It is simply the way that this is written. If it's an undeveloped city property doesn't meet basically the definition in 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3, or 4, then that's just what it is. There's no, I guess for lack of a word, there's no judgment call or anything to sort through.
A lot of these undeveloped properties are forested.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
if it's in the watershed.
No, I'm not talking about the watershed. I'm talking about like a property near West Hill Stem, an additional property up off of Kitsap Lake. These are forested properties. You have full canopy cover.
And so if a person wants to camp there, they'll be camping under trees. I mean, that's how this ordinance works. I'm just letting you know how it works because
Okay, so in other words, we're looking at this ordinance as something that we can't do anything about for weeks. Is that correct?
Right.
Am I completely off base here, Attorney?
That list can be generated quickly, right?
What was that?
The list of every city property that's not excluded by what's written could be generated in a couple days.
By whom?
Well,
By GIS.
I think if there's
I'm looking at the administration.
The auditor spent 6 months on it, compiling this list because the GIS is incomplete.
I think that there's, so I know that a lot of her work has been done and I've talked to her about it, right? That there was a difference in looking at what properties could be used for affordable housing versus what properties are undeveloped. That is those are, one's an easier question than the other. I mean, whether it's undeveloped, whether a piece of property has a building on it, doesn't take into account critical areas, slope, the size of the building, you know, the fund that owns it. The question is the zoning or anything like that. It would just be, is this undeveloped? And then if it is, so we're going to know, then we're going to put it through this. Is it a park property? And if it is, then that's coming off the list. Does it have a city building on it? Like, you know, is it Sheridan Park? And if it is, it comes off the list. And so it's a different ask than what Jenny was asked to do. It's not whether these are places that are suitable for a definition.
I guess, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, it's not whether these properties are suitable to meet the requirements under available overnight shelter. It's whether or not it's an undeveloped property.
I understand. However, the list of the first cut list that Jenny Sims, the auditor, came up with contains some 450 parcels. And a number of them are not on the GIS layer or not the one, therefore, the city would need to comb through them. She has made notations on zoning in many cases, certainly not what fund it belongs to. Yeah. But she's made a lot of notations, and it seems to me that if it took her 6 months to create this list, it will take more than 2 days. Was that the time span that you were mentioning?
We have like the asset management issue, and we have, so this is a map.
Yes.
That has all of the city properties.
No. Or according to Jenny Sims, no, it does not.
Right. There's some that aren't on here, but it definitely,
okay,
I think has.
Okay.
It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
And I mean, it would certainly be a good start. Enough for a list for the purposes of perhaps what Mr. Younger has in mind.
I.e., we could have a list in a few days before this would go to a vote of this is the list of places where when there's not shelter space available, this ordinance would not be enforced. That's a list that could be handed out to folks. And over time, that list could be refined to incorporate the excellent points that there are.
Right, and
Yeah,
if the
missing
properties
pieces.
were developed for, let's say, a apartment that is affordable housing or something like that, which I think then they would be removed from the list.
Yeah.
A live living document, yeah.
Right,
So the
Okay.
only thing I would say is I don't know what the capacity of engineering is. I mean, we absolutely do it before next month, absolutely. But, you know, it might be Tuesday afternoon or something.
And fifth Wednesday, so we got 2
yeah,
weeks
that's
actually.
next week.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're gonna have, yeah, we can get that.
Okay, then I'm just gonna make one more point,
Absolutely.
which is that think about however convenient it would be for centralization of law enforcement to have one large area. Think about the people who are living around there. Think about what happens with a very large community. There's societies of scale, so that if we're planning to just, you know, make one big place, you know, kind of a one-stop shop, that might make it rough on the people around them, and it might make it rough on the people within them. And I'm reiterating Jennifer's point that like there's people that really don't get along, either like sub-legally or legally, and who need to be in separate spaces. Okay, that's fine. All done.
Give you an equal chance to finish out this second round if you had any overreaching comments. Okay. So then in terms of wrapping it up, see your hand up, Benny. Let's see if we can maybe just put out any short suggestions of tweaks, do quick thumbs up and thumbs down. I know a number of small tweaks have been offered. If we can do one round of that and just see we got majority for each one, and then I think we'll have something votable.
My suggestion for council is if we're gonna vote on it on the 6th, I think we put similar to ordinances we've done before. It doesn't go into effect until October 1st. That will give time for notices to be given out to community members who are currently houseless right now. Like that would be extremely cruel to just one day let them know, sorry, you can no longer be here. Good luck. These are the places you can go. I think we need like a little bit of an education campaign for our houseless neighbors. And 2, that gives the administration some time to come back to us and say, all right, we've had a month. These are the properties we've looked at. We've compared it to the auditor's report. These are the funds that we think it's going to take. We think that these 3 parcels are the ones that are close to transportation, close to water. This is how much a bathroom is going to be. I've talked to these nonprofits, XYZ. I say that we still move forward, but I think we delay the actual enforcement of it until October 1st, which would give time for both the administration and for proper notice to people that are might be enforced against.
Just look, thumbs up to add in a clause that it takes effect October 1st.
No, oh, sorry.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Abstaining or
So remind me, is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks after we pass an ordinance, it becomes in
10
effect? 10 days, 2 weeks effectively. So this would be mid-September. So the letters that were written in said, I need help now. I need help now.
all right. I'm seeing majority of thumbs down. Then any other tweaks to throw out? Okay. Chamberlain? Give it a couple. Yeah.
I'd like to discuss the penalty. Does anybody have any recommendations? I would recommend that we lower the amount and add language in there for a warning. I'm not even gonna touch habitual violators because I don't think I would have consensus of everybody to change that, but I do feel like maybe we can work together on the civil infraction component. That's a little harder to, that's just like a straight up fine, right? Because they can't request it be lowered, it's just a straight up fine. Is that right, Attorney Finnell?
Well, I mean, so
They can
Yeah,
appeal
shall.
it if they know the process, but they have to have like an
Right,
address.
that's what they're gonna be cited with. I mean, and so certainly they could request a mitigation. of a
Right,
civil infraction, right, but that's gonna be a hearing. So, I mean, just to throw out ideas, I mean, as points of reference, like, you know, what is our parking fine right now? I think they're $24 or something. I don't think the dollar amount is for, in my experience with, being a public defender and representing people, that live on the streets, the fine is not going to be a deterrent at all because they can't pay it. And so they, it's just noise, right? It's not something that's going to impact the behavior. So if you wanted to completely waive the fine and have 3 warnings, it's going to have the same effect, in my opinion. But it, for the purposes of tracking, like who's been contacted and who's been issued a citation, and then it escalates. I would say when reviewing other codes, I think ours is more, I guess, I don't know what the word is. It is less punitive because it does have the infractions as like a,
I just want to speed it along a little bit, and I don't mean to cut you off, Attorney Finnell. I just want to ask counselors. It sounds like we can lower it if we want to, and I want to see if there's any consensus among the group to lower the infraction and to add language in there for a warning system. You know, like first warning, second warning, third warning, $25. Does anybody have any interest in exploring that?
I guess the first play, thumbs up to lower the monetary amount,
I say get rid of it.
or get,
No,
Chamberlain, would you want to propose getting rid of the monetary amount?
I propose that be in line with the parking infraction
The 24, 25?
after a third.
Say 25 for the round number.
First citation warning, second citation warning, third citation. And then the next level would be 4 or 5, you know, after 4 contact. I don't know. I think that the habitual violators should change after that. The 4th contact.
Losing track a little of something concrete to put for thumbs up, thumbs down. Sorry. You
25.
want to put moving it from 105 to 25 on the table?
25.
Okay. Does anybody want to put a warning system in there where a first contact has no monetary value attached to it?
All right, so let's do thumbs on changing the whole escalation habitual offenders. I'm gonna.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
So I have a question before I can give you a thumbs up on Jennifer's
Okay.
original. And that question simply is, Kylie.
Sorry, yeah, no, you're.
It's
sorry.
okay.
I want to acknowledge I didn't want her. You.
Oh, no worries.
No, it's fine. So Eric, why don't you finish and then we'll.
Well, I feel bad now. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right, Anna, go ahead. Let's be correct about it.
Considering that the Bremerton Police Department did not, to our knowledge, certainly did not inform us of any arrests or anything that they made for people who trespassed, for people who stole, for people who defecated on people's porches over the past several months, I don't think that harsh enforcement of this infraction is, you know, it's one thing I really like about Bremerton Police Department is if there's a way they cannot be punitive, they will try to do it. And I think, I'm not going to say trust the process, but I think that in this case, we can trust Chief Wolf. If it's a $25 ticket, I don't think officers of the Bremerton Police Department are going to start rushing around going, all right, I want to make my quota of $25 tickets. And I think even if it was $1,000, that they would still have the human compassion to look at people that are unfortunate and vulnerable and respect them and warn them. That's what I think.
Eric, you have a question?
So my question is similar to what Councilman Mockler said. It shall constitute a civil infraction subject to a monetary penalty. So to me, that means that the officer has latitude whether to issue a ticket or not. The officer will know his or her shift, the community, and if they see someone for the first time they've never seen, I'm more inclined to believe they'll say, hey, did you know you can't camp here? And then if the person says, no, I did not know, and the officer just said, well, here's a list of approved camping sites, and they go and pack their stuff on their way, I don't think the officer writes a ticket. And so I'm fine with this. If you want to go from $105 to $50, you still need to have a financial incentive. You don't want it to be zero, because then it's like, you know what? Yeah. What are you going to do about it? Write me a ticket. And I understand what you're saying. People say, but just leave it in there or put it down to 50 to appease some people. But I believe in our police department, we use discretion, and I agree. They're not going to be running around writing $25 tickets. However, having said that, if this is someone that is habitually violating this code, once we put in these other provisions allowing them to camp in certain areas, and they said they're just saying, I don't want to be vulgar here, but I'm not going to follow your law, then you're going to have to write the penalties in order to get the habitual violator enacted, and you have to give them 3 infractions.
I do want to point out something about our habitual violator. And Michael, sorry, I'm going to tag you up on here. One of the things to be aware of, though, is so if you just imagine the situation that someone is camped in violation of the ordinance, there's plenty of shelter space, and they've set up in front of someone's house in their parking strip or something like that. If they go out and they're issued a citation for, $50, and then the next day they're issued a citation for $50, and then the next day they're issued a citation for $50, they don't become a habitual violator on day 4, because none of those have been found to be committed by Bremerton Municipal Court. And they could be a while. So
I see.
I just want to be aware of that it's not
3 strikes and you're out immediately.
Yeah.
You still can play
2
ball.
years.
for sometimes quite a while. Michael, is that how you're reading that?
Yeah, it has to be, I think it has to be litigated in the municipal court, found committed before it counts towards being habitual offender status.
Let me throw on the table a proposal of just keeping the language as is and changing it to 50 instead of 105. Look for thumbs on that.
Sure. Whatever.
Come on, people, have a heart. 25. Come on, 25. Come on. Look, I'm gonna get behind y'all, but this is the one concession I'm asking for after all of this crap we've been through.
Okay.
25.
25.
I'll
25. Going
I'll get
once,
you
going
Jennifer.
twice.
Thumbs down, 25.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. All right, I won't make a big deal.
Right in there with the knowledge, we can always amend this ordinance down the road. Yeah. Okay. So
We're moving
I'm sure
on.
you got that.
Say we're moving on.
Yeah. Any other suggestions, Jim?
Wow, we're close.
It's only 8 o'clock.
I think I'm in line. I can't really in good conscience vote for this till I know we have a list, but I do. We haven't given the mayor a chance to speak on this, and I do want some kind of assurance from administration, and not just from Kylie, that we're gonna have a list available if we pass this ordinance. That's the only thing I want to know about.
I think I did hear that ability, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear it. Sorry, I probably couldn't hear. Was it from Director Nucky? Okay.
From
Thank
the
you very
mayor.
much, y'all. Oh, from the mayor. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Map, right? We were saying list, but it's a lot easier to present just a map.
I think a map would work.
Yeah, whatever helps folks the most to know where they can go. Yeah.
It would be challenging to do this.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is.
Any other proposed tweaks? And then,
Other than that language I mentioned earlier.
yeah, so that was the language to say that.
I think Kylie has it. A list of available city-owned properties that are open to the public for camping will be made public. These properties are not available for camping if a city designated camping area is available, and that's on the end of 4 or wherever you think is best fits.
It's basically that the tying the suspended enforcement and the undeveloped properties list altogether. Okay.
So thumbs up for that language included. I
Sure.
think that's a,
People would actually have a place to go. Good change.
yeah, okay.
I really like the idea of people having a place to go. I'm sorry, I'm speaking out of
Sorry,
turn.
it's not going too crazy. Younger, any others?
No.
Okay, excellent. Then, all right. And the only other one I heard, just to not lose track, was I know, the 7-day permit. I don't have strong feelings. I just don't want to lose it.
They were already
They have
doing
a
it.
process. Okay. All right, Attorney Finnell, I think you have the small tweaks to what you drafted. Thank you so incredibly much for your hard work on this over, many weeks.
Weeks.
So more than weeks, God, months.
Yeah.
And I gotta just turn to the camera and say a big thank you to everybody who's spoken up and written in on this. I mean, truly, I think this is maybe the most public input we've had in a given issue in a long time. And I know this is not going to make everybody happy, but I think this is something at least concrete we can put to a vote. All right, so this will go, yes, unless any very last comments, will also go on the September 6th general business. So go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. I wanted to go back to the ordinance itself, where it says the whereas insert additional language regarding city's response to affordable housing homeless. We didn't really talk about that, but is that something that you're gonna handle? Or do we don't need to craft that language, or do we want to craft that language? I'm sorry.
I was gonna start it, and the reason I didn't put it in there is I just wanted, we had a study session at this point, I think a month ago, talking about the different things that the city was doing with regard to affordable housing and homelessness. And there was I didn't exactly have consensus on it. Was there specific things that the council wanted to see, or did you want me to just kind of touch more generally? Or I didn't really know exactly what the assignment was on that. When we originally started way back in June, there was a discussion, I know, February, about how the Lakewood ordinance had that part about that they were doing the budget allocation, and we talked about the reason we didn't want to do that. But I didn't know if you wanted to go into other things. It's not required that we do that, that we put that there, because it's an exhaustive list, and it wasn't always easy to tell the difference between.
Can I suggest some kind of language for it that we say, whereas City Council acknowledges that there is a houseless crisis, that we are affected by a houseless. Can we use strong language like that? I mean, that's just, I don't know all the language, but.
Okay.
Whereas we acknowledge the houselessness crisis in our community.
The city's committed to addressing it.
Yeah.
Quick clarification.
Yeah.
Question. So the very last part about this ordinance will be these places will be outright prohibited. These other places will be allowed unless there is a capacity or space available at a designated shelter or outdoor campground. Unless there's space available at a campground. Is that how you word it? Okay.
Right.
Good. Okay.
The undeveloped property is the place where someone can go and not risk enforcement if there's no safe.
And the other one is just space available at both the campground and shelter.
And then the other one that was kind of blank down toward the bottom, I just didn't know where you guys were all going to land tonight, and so I didn't want to write that section, because usually there's a section, whereas it sort of explains the ordinance, and so I couldn't really finish that one until we had the discussion, but I can do
So you'll fill that in. Okay.
Okay.
So you'll provide a complete passable ordinance for the September 6th. Yeah, general business. And just to say out loud, if there's anything in there that last second isn't quite correct language, you can always make an amending motion to, if we want to, if it's really important. Else,
no, you can. It's not. I mean,
else the council can revisit this in 6 months, a year. Probably should regularly, just to see if there's anything we need to tweak.
Right, and I will say that in reviewing other cities' ordinances, many of them have had to go back in, even sometimes the same year, and do amendments. It's not,
Mhm.
like, don't beat yourself up if that's where we're at.
Special
Because this is, there's a lot of considerations and sometimes unintended consequences. And so, and certainly there is I can make edits, specifically like wording edits and specific deletions at the council meeting, and we have, the public that's going to weigh in on the proposal as well.
Mhm. All right, sounds good. We'll wrap up this item. And again, thanks to everybody for hard work on this.